Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hawk Talk podcast. This is a very special edition. I think it's going to be great because we're going to deep dive into AI, pretty much impacting all aspects of our life. I think there's very few, at least in academia and in the knowledge economy. I'm Darren Browemmer. I'm Associate Professor of Computer Science, and I do have a focus on AI. And my partner here, I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Michael Hogan, and I'm instructor of philosophy at Lake Sumter State College.
So yeah, we're going to dig into a lot of really interesting topics. So AI, like I said, is impacting everything. We're going to kind of start out with AI's focus on education, and I think a lot of professors see it as possibly a negative side, as a threat to academic integrity. But there's also a lot of really positive things that can come out of it because it gives students an amazing opportunity to go research, find information, ask questions, and really determining what questions to ask and being curious and digging into the material. That's really what we want students to do. And so we want to direct students kind of in that direction. But first, let's kind of kick things off with the topic of AI tutor. So this is a really interesting topic because we know that students learn from engagement. The more engaged a student is, the more likely they are to learn the material. And they can engage with us as instructors. They get a lot out of interacting and engaging with their peers in the class, maybe even sometimes more than with us. But then there's always, I have student has additional questions. Something comes to mind, or they're up at 2 a.m., they stay up late. AI is available to, kind of work with them, ask questions, dig into the material. So I'm going to open this up at this point, and there's a lot of questions and a lot of research around this area. And Dr. Hogan, you want to take the topic from here?
Yeah, a couple things I'll say is on the engagement issue. I do think if students are engaging it more, they're likely to use it more responsibly. If they're digging in deeper to the questions and more interested in the topics, they're probably unlikely to just copy and paste answers. They're actually more likely to probably understand where the sources are coming from, how AI is being used, how the responses are being produced. And then another thing I'll say that Darren mentioned at the beginning, there seems to be an assumption, or there seems to be a couple different assumptions when it comes to AI. There seems to be this assumption that all AI use is bad, so we need to clamp down on AI use. And while I do think AI, no technology is, I would say, value neutral. Any technology can be used for good purposes or bad purposes, and so similar things may have been said about the internet when it was coming around, and maybe it's going to take everyone's jobs or things like that, and yet the internet can be very useful, a very good tool. And similarly, we could see that with AI. And so my focus in the classroom is helping students use it responsibly. I don't think there's a way to just completely force students from stopping to use it. And so I'd rather help them use it responsibly and not keep it in the dark. Usually if you try to stop something from being used, you're keeping it in the dark and you're not regulating its use. And so I think that's a good thing. And then I'll just say one other thing on using AI is helping students realize that they are at sort of a loss if they're just utilizing AI as a kind of tool to either copy and paste answers or cheat in some way. And I do think they are cheating themselves because they're not developing certain skills that will allow them to join the workforce later on. Obviously, critical thinking skills are one of those. And so, helping students realize that learning how to use it is actually a virtue and in developing good intellectual and thinking skills, but it's an intellectual virtue, and it can benefit them later on in their lives.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You brought up a lot of great points. I think there is this kind of stigma a little bit associated with people using AI. And I think what's happening now in academia and the workforce is most people are using AI personally to try to enhance and be more productive. If I can get more work done faster, that's great for me. Organizations are still trying to figure out how to do it at an organizational level, and those are bigger challenges. Um, but I don't think we should be ashamed of using it. And I think, and perhaps I'm biased because I do teach AI, but we should be encouraging it. It's a tool that students are going to have both in their academic career and certainly when they get into the workforce. You mentioned possibly, some options would be just eliminating it. That's just not, I don't think, going to be successful. It's, you've got it on your phone right here. Everyone has it. I mean, students have always been able to cheat. Maybe it's a little bit, those who are inclined to do it, maybe it's a little bit easier to do it now because this app I've got on my phone that I use for other things, I could possibly use that. But I think to add to what you said, we should be teaching them how to use it and empowering them. One really great thing that is in some of the tools and ties into the AI tutoring concept is that I believe all of the major tools now there are different modes that you can do. So you can change what model you're using, whether it's a thinking model or a fast model. But also, usually on the left side of most tools, there's a mode where you can change, I want to create an image, or I want to do deep research, which the AI tool is going to spend more time looking up sources on the internet and pulling together hopefully valid citations and research for you. But more importantly here, many of them have a learn and study mode. I know ChatGPT does. I believe Gemini perhaps calls it something different. And even since the beginning, I've noticed that Gemini is a little bit better in this regard than ChatGPT, which tends to give you lots of information. You ask a question, it will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about that topic. Gemini, historically, and I think all of these tools in this learning mode will kind of walk you through the process. It'll give you a little bit of information. You can engage with that, start to understand that concept, and then kind of build on that and go to the next, like take you step by step, like a tutor would, right? Like a learning process would. Yeah. So, I don't have data on whether students are actually using this learning mode, but I do advocate for it. And I think that is a great step forward in the AI tutoring space.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about that is one of the things I'd like to implement in my courses is testing out whether just like comparing two courses and seeing if a student uses, like allowing them to use AI for an assignment without the help of the instructor and then with the help of the instructor to see if, because there's some evidence that you can't really take out the human component to the tutoring process. There's been some research done on that. And if that's true, then maybe it's not the case that everything will reduce just to AI. We're not going to have, we might not have these like super factories where everything's being run by AI. We still need the human element to direct and to sort of lead the process in that. And so one of the things I like to test out and see if I can confirm some of this research is to see if guidance can increase student either productivity or student grades or help them with particular concepts. Because I don't think at the end of the day you're going to take that human element out, even if you can become more efficient.
That's a great point. I think if you are solely using an AI tutor, it's just you're not going to get the same experience. I don't think most students want that either. I mean, we all, we're all people, and we all value being able to interact with our peers and, of course, our professors. I think there's what you said is about the direction and the guidance. So this is really important. AI is a knowledge multiplier or a productivity multiplier, I would say. At the end of the day, though, we as people are still the ones that are going to use it for a given purpose. We know what we want to accomplish within our organization. Only we know how to apply what it tells us to solve a particular problem. And you still need people to get things done at the end of the day. But on the direction part, an analogy that I like to use is airplanes at this point. Essentially software can fly the plane by itself. Pilots, co-pilots do a little bit of takeoff and landing, but essentially the software can automate everything. Now, with that said, an airplane doesn't wake up in the morning to decide, hey, I'm going to fly from Detroit to Orlando. A human sets that direction and sets that plan. there's a lot of activity going on in research as well. AI is able to help with a lot of research, and you're starting to see headlines and stories where AI made some new mathematical discovery, and then in other scientific areas as well. So I think even there, I don't see humans are vital in that, because we are the ones who are determining what are the right questions to ask. Where should we be going? We have a tool now that can help us do research, and students, I would say the same thing if you're doing a paper as well that requires research. In a lot of cases, if you're able to, I think allowing students to use AI to help with that research is going to be beneficial for them going into the future. You can then, how do you synthesize that information and put it into a report or a presentation? And that requires some human understanding and human touch. And that, I think, at the end of the day, will help the student a lot better. But I think humans are going to be in the loop for quite some time, I would think.
Yeah, and I think one of the maybe the thoughts or concerns is because AI appears to produce human-like behavior. Maybe one day it will, or maybe some people may think today, because it has its own goals and purposes, and it's just not the evidence just doesn't seem to bear that out right now, that it can do those kinds of things, and so you're going to still need the human to direct it and guide it in some way. I remember there was a recent article by I don't know if he's a blogger. I think his name is Matt Schumer, and it got 55 million views. And it was just this overhype of how AI is going to take over everything, because now you've got certain AI agents from like Claude, from Anthropic, that can produce its own software. And so now the worry is like, oh, it's going to take over the software industry, or like Microsoft or Salesforce, that does these like service software as a service industry. And so if you dig further, some of the inferences he makes are just not like, he makes it sound like AI is like at this sort of point where 99% of it is like accurate and it's getting things right, and that sort of assumes again that it's got these goals and purposes in place so that it can do all these things, and that's just not true if you dig into the details of what he's talking about. So there's a lot of AI hype, and I don't think yet it's really has any sort of goals or purposes. I think the programming is still built into and created by the humans, and this might be a weird way to think about it, but I don't think at this point it's going to like break its programming, and this like brand new code is going to emerge, and it's going to sort of create its own goals and agency, and there's just no evidence of that right now.
The machines haven't taken over
yet. And so I think the hype is what's sort of scaring people, and so they lose out on the focus that you still need, again, like you said, that the human element to come in, and there might be even some evidence that and I don't know I forget who the name of it is, this writer who showed that with any new technological advancement, it's not true that it's true there are job losses, but it's not true that there was a net negative in job losses, but like it created a whole new industry where people could have jobs, so there was a net gain in job losses. And so I just think the hype kind of creates this maybe only a mode of scarcity, and people are worried and fearful. So
And there's going to be some disruption, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's not the first technology revolution. If you go back far enough, 50% of the population worked in agriculture just to support everybody having enough food. So obviously that's a fraction, a percent or two right now, and we don't have 50% unemployment. It does take time for the market to kind of settle itself out. So in the short term, you might see we already seen entry-level hiring go down. I've seen between 6 or 10%, but that capital that was going to be spent on that labor, companies are not just going to sit on that and earn a few percent. They still have a responsibility to shareholders to maximize the value. So there's going to be higher order, higher value added jobs that will be created as well. It just takes a little bit of time.
And one thing I'll add to that I've seen is while those jobs have decreased, we've seen an increase in jobs in the field of AI. So, for example, there's certain companies that are hiring like subject matter experts to actually help train the AI. So it's a kind of gig work where you can sign up and you can get paid hourly to. And I think actually you mentioned to me that
I have
you
done a
did that.
little bit of it because I wanted to see the
And
experience.
notice the AI, like it needs that. It's not. It just can't produce. Sui gener, generously. Like it can't produce its own sort of aims and goals, and just come up with this like original sort of content. Even though it appears that way, it needs the training from the humans to sort of have that capacity and ability. And so those are jobs that were created. I mean, even if they're hourly jobs, so there's still jobs that were created. There's prompt engineering.
I've seen vibe coder as a actual job title.
Yeah. So with those losses, there's these other jobs coming in, and people do adjust to this to the economy because they recognize. So for example, my brother-in-law just sent a text and saying he knows some people who have office jobs and they're worried about those, so they're going out and actually learning trade skills because it looks like AI is gonna need a lot of trade skills, maybe to build data centers or things like that. So people do adjust, the market adjusts, the economy adjusts. Uh, and things like that.
Yeah, we are at a very interesting point right now, and there has been some recent market disruption, in part because of a couple of agentic tools, software has come out recently. So it's probably worth talking about that for a minute. 2025 was supposed to be the year of AI agents, and kind of just to double click on that for a second. What do we mean by that? So you go to ChatGPT or Gemini, you ask a question, it will respond to you, and that's what the interaction is limited to. Maybe deep research, it will do a little more on the back end and then let you know when the report is done. So agents go a step further. So they are actually taking a goal or instructions that you have given it, and it will go and autonomously do some of that work for you. So that is a big difference. And so two tools in particular that have come out in that space. The first is really an open source agent platform. It was Claudebot that I think you mentioned earlier. In the span of a couple of days, it changed from Claudebot. Anthropic gave them a difficult time with the name infringement there. Then it was Moltbot, which spun off Moltbook, a social media network just for agents. We can talk about that. And eventually it's called OpenClaw. So OpenClaw, if you look it up, that's what it's called right now. So I actually have installed this on a cloud server. I don't recommend installing it on your personal computer because it has access to all of your files. Unless you really know what you're doing or run it in a Docker container to isolate it. But I have mine on a cloud instance. It's also trendy to run it on a Mac Mini. I just got my Mini arrived the other day, so I'm very excited. But I can give you an example of what it does. I have told it about myself that I'm a professor of computer science focused on AI. Also, I'm in a PhD program, so I'm doing research myself. So I actually have it daily looking up what is the most recent research in the areas that I'm interested in. It reads those reports or papers, I should say, once they're available, summarizes them, puts in some notes, and it will. This is the kind of the moment, the aha moment. It will message me on my phone on WhatsApp and give me an update for the research help that it's doing. That is such a tangible thing that really, and so that's one piece of software that's really just taken off. The other one is Claude Cowork, and it is doing a similar thing focused on office work, automating email, anything Microsoft Office related, so Word documents, email, calendar, the ability to do that. So I think the market has all of a sudden seen, we've talked about agents for so long. It's actually really starting to become a reality. I feel like we've recently just crossed this threshold of not only just utility, but do I have trust in this agent? Because you're ceding some level of control in order for it to be more productive for you. This is in computer science, we call this the AI control problem. So to get more productivity, you have to give up a little more. You have to be a little more flexible. So do you trust what that agent is going to do? In terms of, I would not trust it at this point to install on my computer because it would have access to all of my data. But in an isolated environment where all it really has is my key to use Claude on the back end, that's the worst that could happen. I've got a limit set on that. So that trust will grow, though. Now that these agents and related software are seeing large scale adoption, you have to focus on the security concerns, and
Yeah.
so those will get better. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing I was going to say about that, I think I almost forgot what I was going to say, is, I mean, there's security concerns, but the the efficiency that you gain, so they're like energy costs that you have, and if you notice, Darren's not like, he's still doing the research process. He's just gaining more efficiency in that process, and so he hasn't. It doesn't seem like he's lost out on any sort of skill by him, by having somebody text him. And so there is a way to use it. Like, he's not just at having this thing do everything for him.
It's not writing my dissertation.
Yeah. And so there are energy costs and efficiency gains that come with this, and I think any new technology, that's what they bring, and there's lots, and that's where the disruption is, and having to figure out how do I use this and in the right way.
Yeah, those research notes and summaries that it gives me, what that lets me do, to your point about being more efficient, I can decide, okay, is it worth my time for myself personally to go read that paper?
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you took an arbitrary research paper off the shelf, some of them are pretty dense. You can easily invest an hour or two doing this, and there's so much research coming out all the time. There's literally not enough hours in the day for me to be able to go through it all. So yeah, thank you for bringing it up so I can clarify how I'm actually using AI, which I believe is and hope that is in a responsible and ethical way.
And maybe I'll give just an example of how I've used it in when I'm teaching. So I don't use it to maybe create the content for me. I use it as sort of a brainstorming mechanism to maybe a layout, or chatting with it to figure out what's the best way to approach this concept. And there's many times I don't really think the responses it gives me are as helpful, but it's a brainstorming tool because I don't have somebody sitting there to brainstorm all the time to because it's gathering lots of information, lots of data that I can't do on my own. And so that's a efficiency thing that it would take me much longer to do.
Yeah, in what you're using in your use case and mine, the most important part is the critical thinking and evaluation that we are doing with what it's giving us.
Yeah,
it can greatly help us, and it can also give us just a complete kind of garbage response too. And if you just take it blindly, you're going to end up going down a wrong path. These models are still, at the end of the day, based on statistics and data, so they're probabilistic. Originally, that's why you saw a large number of hallucinations and things like people just kind of copying. There was a top 20 songs of the year article that came out where half of the songs didn't actually exist. You can't blindly use this. Now, all of those things are getting better, but there's not a 0% chance of a hallucination. All of these things are improving, but beyond just that, even the valid information it's giving you, the critical thinking that you apply, only you know what you want to do with this information. What's the goal you're trying to achieve? What research are you trying to do? Or if you're a student, what are you trying to learn?
Exactly.
There is one other kind of, let's dive into now, in students, and we talk with these chatbots a little bit, and there's a couple of different issues that can come up with that. They're greatly helpful. I'll give you a personal example. So I had back surgery last year, and I've kind of been recovering, and I have a very long chat with ChatGPT about, okay, this hurts here today, or I'm worried that I might have re-injured myself. I actually didn't, but I don't have access to my doctor all the time. And in fact, most people have very limited amount of time with their doctor. So for me, it's been crucial. It's helped me mentally get through some of these challenging times. Now, of course, you have to verify any important. I will double check things. I don't just take it on blind faith. I also, if I see something that doesn't sound necessarily right, I might also ask Gemini, ask a couple of others. But I know that I'm talking with an AI, obviously. I'm not talking to my actual doctor. At the same time, it is very reassuring when it tells me, okay, here's what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
That it's undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still talking to an
And
AI.
correct me if I'm wrong, it is getting better at those types of things. Like, I'm not saying it's a doctor and it's like actually diagnosing things, but it is getting better at giving accurate information, like on medical
Oh, absolutely.
conditions. I've heard that. Is that right? That and more people are using it for those types of purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The medical use cases, and actually, my PhD program is at Florida Atlantic, and they have a lot of medical research going on. Medical use cases are fantastic for AI. Think about how many medical imaging, for example,
Mm.
that you an AI can go through many images. Now, it's not the final say
Hmm.
or diagnosis, but you give that information to a technician,
You
a
still need the
doctor, they
technician.
still
Yeah.
apply their medical knowledge and skills to figure out
Hmm.
what's going on to diagnose. That is a huge efficiency gain. So medical use cases
Hmm.
are fantastic. They recently, ChatGPT has a health product, I believe, and I think one other vendor does as well. So I think I'm not the only person asking
Yeah.
ChatGPT about
Yeah.
my health
Yeah.
or other AI tools. A lot of people are doing this, and it really fills a huge void. This is the AI tutor use case. You know, students have time with us as instructors,
Hmm.
but they probably have a lot more questions and time with
Hmm.
us. It's similar for the
Hmm.
medical, me and my
Yeah.
doctor.
Very similar.
So I have, again, it's not a doctor, but it does have
Hmm.
a lot of information, and it's greatly helped me. But what do you think about this, Dr. Hogan? It's hard to disassociate, or it's hard to. Let me put it this way: it's easy to forget you're just talking with a computer and not a person.
Yes. So this is an issue that has come up. It does seem like um, because of the way AI can produce unique sounding prompts. So back in the day, if you had some sort of uh, computer model or something and you gave an input, it would give some sort of generic output and it would not sound like a human. But because it can sound like a human, there's a sense in which we, as human beings, can form a kind of attachment to it and almost feel like we're connecting with something. So it'd be maybe no different like if you went into a chat group online and you're chatting with somebody, but you can't see them, you don't know who, maybe you don't even know who they are. But if they're writing a response, you're connecting with them. And so it makes sense that as a human, we'd form a kind of attachment to that. And so that is one of the downsides is because we form that we might forget we're actually talking to a large language model, and that can be very effective and helpful. And so we might take for granted and not check the sources, or we might take for granted and not double check what it's saying. And so this does raise ethical questions about safeguards and rails around uh, AI, because they're having cases where people form these attachments and it looks like they were maybe predisposed to certain sorts of whether it's depression or having suicidal thoughts. And there have been cases where people have committed suicide because they've and we want to
Yeah.
blame the technology, but it's not clear that well, I should say it raises ethical concerns, but it's not clear that it's primarily the technology's fault. It could be the person was predisposed to that. But what it raises is any new technology is going to raise ethical issues, and so I always have to be cautious of that because it's very easy to just type in something, get a response, and because it sounds a certain way, what's that uh, that that phrase that they use with
Oh,
the
this
the uncanny
sycophancy.
valley,
Oh, yes.
right? Where well, because it sounds so human-like, it's not uncanny, or it's like you would look at a robot or something, and if it moves a weird certain way, you could tell it's a robot. But the more human-looking and the more it acts like us, we are much more familiar with it. But so there's this thing called the uncanny valley, where we move closer and closer to a human-like thing, and we don't have this weird feeling towards it. But if you've ever seen a robot or something move, we have this weird reaction to it. And so I think we're not having as weird of a reaction because it's producing this human-like response, and so we do become more attached to it. I don't know if that's where you were going, but that's what I was thinking about. I'm sorry if I took it off the
No,
rails.
all
Or,
good.
okay.
The point you made about the predisposition, I think, is a really important one. Going back a number of years, people were saying when video games became popular that would be the downfall of all young people, and you could probably insert any other different technologies there. I think the technology is perhaps an accelerator or instigator of some of those predispositions, and it is definitely a concern because of the attachments that we can form, even though we know. I think your analogy about I'm talking with someone on text or in a message group that I haven't actually met, but I still, maybe subconsciously, I just have some general vague idea of picture of the person on the other end, that it's, not necessarily, and even what's really interesting about all of this, one of the fathers of AI, if you will, or pioneers, Alan Turing, all the way back in the 1950s, before we had any of this even remotely close, was thinking that, okay, if I could talk to a machine
right.
and it could seem human, or I could not tell the difference between human or not, that would be a sign of intelligence.
Yes.
And that was really profound that he was already thinking about that. At this point, we're not really talking about that anymore, that Turing test, because language models are so good at it.
Yeah.
And we were just having an interesting discussion. Perhaps this is a sidebar, but some students, because they're afraid of getting flagged for possibly AI use, they're actually introducing grammatical errors or other things in their writing to try to make it look human.
Yeah, so that's one case where it sounds like the student is trying to demonstrate that they actually wrote the material, but there's another case where it seems like students are they're not doing specifically that, but they're writing, whether it be an essay or some sort of response to a prompt, and they're getting exhausted by having to prove that they wrote the material. Now, I don't know what the percentages are of people who are doing that versus people who are just copying and pasting answers. But again, this clamp down on it seems to be creating lots of ramifications, and one of those is students haven't proved to their professors they wrote it. So then now they're going to these things called humanizers to make it sound human, so that the professor will think that they actually wrote it, which seems like a disastrous consequence, right? Because we want to uplift those students who are writing well and doing well, and so it was just an interesting thing that's happening because of this phenomenon. I'm not sure how we solve it at this point, but for me, I do give students the benefit of the doubt, and I want to have strong evidence because you have certain models or checkers or plagiarism checkers, and it used to be that they were pretty good at detecting things because people would copy them from just the internet, and so you had a way to check that, but we don't have that, and so even though I really think it sounds like AI, I want some strong evidence to show that it's AI before I submit some sort of academic integrity violation. So I do give the students the benefit of the doubt because of issues like this.
So let's step back a little bit. So AI is a tool that can help you write extremely well. It's great for non-native English speakers, let's say, or other people who have difficulty writing. But it is an issue to deal with in terms of when we want students to learn how to write. So if we think about the calculator was introduced, and that's another example where I think a lot of academia felt like, okay, students are never going to learn arithmetic or math at this point because the calculator can do it. Now, I don't need to necessarily crunch all the numbers, but I need to understand when to use division or multiplication, how to apply those concepts. And that's basically what the SAT is now based on, because you can use a calculator if you take that math exam. Okay, now let's think about writing. So writing as a skill is something that we always want to teach students. But now we have a machine that can write exceptionally well for us if I just give it my thoughts and notes. So how important is it that students still learn the art of writing, given that I've got a machine that can do it really well for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it circles back to what we said in the beginning. So I have seen evidence, and again, there's probably more research that's going to be coming out, that when students are engaging AI in that manner, uh, uh, the research has shown that certain parts of their brain that that suggest that this is where maybe rational thinking occurs, although it's hard to isolate that to one part of the brain, uh, suggests that those parts decrease. So that could be evidence that it is like strong evidence, empirical evidence that is affecting us as human beings. Now, what's the importance of critical thinking, of utilizing these types of skills? Well, one is these skills are pretty much utilized everywhere. So even if it's true that, let's say, AI takes over a bunch of jobs, you're still going to have some human beings responsible for things that have to make certain types of decisions. Uh, whether they're in like a factory setting or something like that. And so you're still going to have to make these types of decisions. Critical thinking is important in ethical dilemmas. Uh, it's not clear right now that an AI can really evaluate an ethical dilemma in the kind of nuance that we need. It could give you some of the information and some of the facts of the case and what people have said, but it's not clear that it can morally evaluate that itself. So critical thinking is highly important to that. And then just general communication skills. If you are in an office job or some type of job that requires constant communication, it's not very effective if you can't communicate clearly to your boss about something, especially if there's a deadline or it's crunch time and you have to get like a project done. It's just not going to be efficient or effective. And so I think that particular skill is very practical, especially because for our students, if they're getting an education and they're going into whatever field it is, if it turns out that they're just losing this skill, I don't know how they're going to adapt to the field that they're going to go into. I don't know how they're going.
If you can't effectively communicate the work that you're doing or what you've discovered, you're going to be of lesser value.
Yeah, of lesser value. Yeah, exactly.
And it's a great point. It's often an underdeveloped skill, I would say, in a lot of students as they enter the workforce. So for having them go through that is great. I think what you talked about in terms of writing, to me, I often think of writing is thinking. And I know that and this is maybe another philosophical concept, in order to, write a paper, I need to be able to reason through it and think through it. I do understand some people are more visually oriented, so I'm not claiming it's the only way of doing it, but it does force you to think. And when I worked at Amazon for 5 years, and they are kind of notoriously do not like bringing a PowerPoint to a meeting because you can just have some bullet points and kind of hand wavy type of here's what we're recommending to do or decisions we'd like to make without getting into the details. So their kind of approach is to have you write up to a 6-pager, no more than that. And the part that I even loved was you don't even have to read the paper before you get to the meeting. The first 15 minutes is just everybody reading, and then you discuss it. But the idea is that by writing out in detail what it is you're proposing, it forces you to think through it.
Yes, exactly.
Not the only way, but so do you think that aspect is something that we're going to be losing a bit here?
I do. If we don't help students responsibly use it, I do think we're going to have a generation of students, and maybe they'll adjust to that reality and realize it's harmful to them, because maybe they won't have that skill to go for a job, and they'll realize, wow, I blew that. But yeah, if we don't treat it responsibly and help students guide them through that, I do think we're going to lose some of that ability. I don't really have any sort of like analogy for that historically, or I can't think of anything off the top of my head where we've lost that kind of ability.
It is a bit of a unique problem.
Yeah, but I will say, a point you raised was when it comes to thinking and writing. One of the things that I talk about in my class is like the nature of consciousness, and you mentioned the Turing test, and some people separate intelligence from consciousness. But what I will say is, it does not seem like a large language model or AI, whatever you want to call it, at this stage has what we would call true understanding. a depth of understanding of the content. It can just sort of regurgitate something. And this is the problem why it's not a very good, it doesn't make very good inferences with things because it doesn't have that true understanding. This is why it needs humans to help train it, because we can make the inferences, like the experts can make those inferences and help train it to do that. And the reason I bring that up is when you are writing something, it takes a kind of effort to really think through your thoughts and develop, whether it's a kind of essay or you're responding to a prompt, but develop some coherent thought, and you start to have a depth of understanding. And so I'll teach in my class this argument against the fact that AI is, or I should say, computers can think. Now, it's a famous argument that this philosopher John Searle comes up with, but I think it's still very powerful, and I think it gets to the heart of what Searle was talking about. He talks about thinking or intelligence, but I think what he really means is there's some sort of like conscious understanding that you're going through, and so he thinks that computers can just manipulate symbols, similar to maybe an LLM, and manipulate them, and then produce a probabilistic output. But they can't understand. And so he has this famous thought experiment where you could have somebody sit in like a room, and they could have some symbol book, and he uses Chinese as an example, and you could pass symbols into the room. The person doesn't understand Chinese, but they can manipulate the symbol book and then pass out, translate Chinese symbols into like coherent written English, but they don't understand Chinese. And sometimes I think about LLMs. Is that what's going on? Even the sophisticated ones, maybe they'll reach a level of sentience. Maybe they'll reach a point. I don't know. But his argument seems to apply, and it goes back to your larger point of like, I don't think they have this true depth of understanding that human beings or biological beings have, and that's what we care about when we're trying to communicate thoughts and write down things. There's this certain depth that they have that these models don't at this point seem to have.
Yeah, I would agree. And your call out for the Searle thought experiment of the Chinese room is fantastic. If anyone who is interested in AI and the philosophy behind it, going deeper into it, I would highly encourage you to look up both the Turing test and then the critique or primary critic of that is Searle's thought experiment. And so on the flip side, people would say, well, okay, the system as a whole, if I don't necessarily think about the person sitting in the room at the desk and they have a rule book and like, okay, if I get this symbol in, I do this, from the observer on the outside who just gets an answer that makes sense and in Chinese, and they're a Chinese speaker,
Exactly.
it appears as if it is intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's an important distinction. And we can get into some of the, I guess, specific philosophical points on it. There's also then just the practical aspect. So I agree with you. I do not, in terms of a consciousness, I don't believe that AIs have that. I mean, maybe something will change. Certainly not an LLM. LLMs, critics have said one of the phrases is a stochastic parrot. So stochastic is a fancy term for essentially saying random. And so parrot is you're just regurgitating back things that you've heard. So you're kind of randomly giving back. Now, the major, I would say, advancement in models that happened, I think about a year ago when DeepSeek first came out, is they do more reasoning or inference that you mentioned.
Okay.
Now, here's the really interesting thing. How do they do more reasoning or thinking? Well, at the time that you ask the question, at the time that you give the prompt, it generates more intermediate tokens is the word that it technically used, but those are either parts of a word or entire words. But it's producing more words. It's in the interim. It's thinking out loud, if you will. And so obviously a language model, the only tool that it has is language. But that is how it's doing its reasoning, is it's producing more thoughts and intermediate steps. The canonical example is before reasoning models first came about, there was a trick where you could just put at the end of your prompt, think step by step, which would kind of force the response, direct the model to, okay, first I'm going to do this. I'll get an interim result, and then I'll do that, and then I'll make a decision. Nowadays, the reasoning mode is more so built in. You don't need the tricks so much. but and often many models, if you're in, I know in Gemini, I believe they do this. If you want to see all of those intermediate response
Okay.
sentences, utterances, you can. Otherwise, it'll just give you a summary of, okay, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about step one now. I'm thinking about step two, and then you get the final response. So, chain of thought is what that's called.
Can I say something about that? And so this is where, in my field, where the debate might go, and it can get a bit abstract, but I think it is relevant to suppose you have this reasoning model. Um, what in my field, what people would, uh, uh, which, and I think it helps because the worry is maybe AI is going to somehow get rid of the human element. Um, is it can show those steps, but and this is what Searle and I think others like philosopher David Chalmers would point out is when you make those inferential steps, there's a kind of conscious understanding you're going through that it doesn't seem like those models are doing. And so a philosophical point would be it could for lack of a better word, mimic those steps, but is it actually making those inferences like we would make those inferences? So like think of when you go through a mathematical argument or when you do algebra, you have a kind of aha moment that you see the answer. You have a true understanding of it. And it's not clear at this point that LLMs are doing that, which is an interesting thought. Now, I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying at this stage, it's important to recognize that that could be a limitation on something.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I think that's a fantastic point. I think we as humans operate this way too. If I think about in my courses I take as a PhD student, the professor will talk about a new topic. I might do a little research on my own, and I might understand the mechanics of how to do that task, maybe even solve that problem. That's not the same as truly understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
Because this, I would say, happened for me many years ago when I first studied calculus. I first kind of learned the mechanics of how to figure out a derivative, how to do integration, and okay, I could pass the test. I don't think it was until a while later that I really understood what the value of that was, how powerful it really was and all of the applications. So there is a distinct difference between what an LLM could do, the inference steps, what even we as students or just people can do, and true understanding.
Yeah, and so this is something else I'll teach my students, and again, it comes from philosopher David Chalmers, is that there's this idea of the hard problem of consciousness versus the soft problem, and the soft problem of consciousness is the idea that we can explain intelligence in either like a computational or functional terms where we have these inputs and outputs and there's all these intermediate steps that we can show, and some people think that's a kind of intelligence, but he says none of that can explain for again lack of a better, the what it is like experience when I see a red rose or when I'm in pain. And he calls these qualitative experiences. We can't reduce that to merely the functional steps that we take. And so when you think about an LLM, it could maybe give you all these steps, but is it going through an experience like that aha moment? And Chalmers would argue no, that consciousness is maybe a fundamental feature of the world, which is interesting. So that's just a tangential philosophical point that relates to our conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're getting at was people have emotions. We have emotions, and I think that's kind of getting at what you were discussing. And an AI, I don't believe has that. Certainly not at this point. And the interesting bit is that emotions, whether we understand it or not, or want it to happen, I think they influence a lot of what we do, even from an academic or research perspective. I think emotions are going to steer us in some way, shape, or form, perhaps subconsciously. And that's a much different a level that the computers don't have. And I think it can be good or it can be bad. It can certainly bias us, which would be a negative outcome of that. But I think it's helpful too. I think it can steer us help us make discoveries that are uniquely human, that no computer would ever be able to observe, or I guess feel, perhaps, maybe is a better way to say it.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, emotions have a kind of qualitative component to them. When we're feeling, when we're feeling we're in pain, or we're fearful or something, there's some sort of qualitative experience. And it is interesting, though, that we there's evidence when we train models, uh, because maybe we, like, for example, some of the models will uh, be deceptive, but humans are deceptive, and it's likely that, but we can't train it to have emotions, or we can't train it to have feelings yet. I'm just saying the evidence we have suggests that there it doesn't have, it lacks, empathy. It can't step into another person's shoes, and so it's just interesting that that component, maybe we it we train it in a certain way, and it might because it might mimic human behavior in that way, but it can't maybe mimic, or sorry, it can't seem to produce emotions in that
Well,
way.
as a I guess a tangible example of that, in that health thread that I mentioned, I might be telling ChatGPT my back hurts in a certain way today, and many of its responses will be, "I'm sorry to hear that. I know that must be tough for you today, but here's how we can get through this." So that seems like there's some emotion there, but it's doing that because it was trained to do that. That's the difference between utterances and
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So we've been, I think, dancing around this topic with consciousness and some of the other parts of the discussion. But what is really even intelligence? And there are so many definitions. I found a paper which collected over 70
Yeah.
different definitions of what is not just intelligence, but artificial intelligence. The one I'll go first here, and then I'll hand it to you. One definition that I think is really great. It is really hard to define, and that's why,
Yeah.
going back to Turing, he didn't try to define the internals. He took a behavioral approach. He's like, from the outside, if I can't tell if you're human or a computer, that's good enough, because he recognized the internal definition is so difficult.
Yeah.
But one that I really like, I just wrote an article recently about how all of AI is in some way a search problem. When I took an artificial intelligence course in my undergrad back in 1994, search was a major component of that. And so you start off looking at game planes. So take a simple game like tic-tac-toe. The player X goes first. There's 9 possible places they could go. They pick somewhere, and then you can branch off from there. Okay, where will O go? And you can imagine this huge search tree where you're looking for what moves will be good for me versus the opponent. And even in a very simple game like tic-tac-toe, you get a very large search space. For chess, it's astronomically large. And then for the game of Go, which I'm not familiar with myself, but AlphaGo became a world-class player. There are more possible board combinations in Go than there are observable atoms in the universe. Like, we couldn't build a computer. We couldn't build enough compute to go through every possibility. So what is actually intelligence? My favorite definition is, I'm just going to paraphrase it here, intelligently going through the search space to find a good solution. Sometimes we have to try different things to get to where we want to go, but generally speaking, our intelligence is guiding us to not try. If I'm going to go from Orlando to Chicago, like, I don't start, I don't get on a boat heading south. I mean, maybe I could end up getting there, but I start to go in the right direction. And I thought that's a really good definition, because in life, and we talked about AI agents, they're always making decisions. What am I going to do next? How am I going to process this response? Do I want to point out this email and summarize it and tell my user that, hey, you should look at this, or should I move it into the not urgent category? Those are decisions that are constantly being made. What research steps should I take? What site should I go look at? So there's an infinite number of things that could be done, but intelligence is kind of looking at, okay, well, what is the right direction, the best steps that I could take? It's not a holistic definition, but I thought it was pretty insightful.
Yeah, that's a pretty good definition. And going back to what you said about the game Go, I remember reading an article about it might have been an LLM, but some sort of AI that was trained to play the game of Go, and apparently came up with some novel way
Yes.
to beat the game that nobody, I guess, at the time thought of. And so they went through it and they said, "Yeah, this is actually a way to do it." So let's say intelligence is some like you're producing some uniqueness or novel type of thing, but of course the problem is like we would think that there are some people that are intelligent that maybe can't do that. Maybe people with cognitive disabilities. So I worked with somebody a young adult who had autism, and he had some mobility issues, and we tried to help him live an independent life. And I would say he was intelligent. He could search out for things, like you said. He could survive. Like he could do things on his own. And I would say he was an intelligent person. But I don't know if like could he do what the game Go did? And so if not, then we would have to say he's not intelligent. And so that's the problem with the definition of intelligence is some people might pass that definition while others not. And but we do think they're intelligent. So intelligence is notoriously difficult to define. And going back to what Chalmers said is we can define like computational intelligence. So a lot of people think uh, uh, giving functional definitions of intelligence. So you might think if I can like the Turing test, if I can show that it can either behave a certain way or gives a sort of functional definition, right? You give it an input, it takes that input and it gives you an output. That's a kind of function. Perhaps it's intelligent, but of course it does. There could be people that are intelligent but maybe couldn't pass the Turing test, and so behavior is not a good guide to considering what intelligence is. But then the question is, well, what is? And it's just notoriously difficult to define. And so Chalmers thinks that's what the hard problem is. Probably what he's talking about is maybe some type of like genuine understanding might go into being intelligent. So there's definitions of like emotional intelligence. Is that a kind of so there's like yeah 5 or 6 different definitions of intelligence, and does it mean that we all have to meet those to be like quote unquote intelligent, or do we only have to meet one of those? And so I think it's notoriously difficult to define, but I would say the helpful distinction between like a functional definition or a computational definition, or this idea where we can define intelligence in these like cognitive behavioral terms where we have these inputs and these outputs, that is helpful because it seems like we can do that. But are we leaving something out where to be intelligent like is to have a kind of emotional experience or something? Is that required of being intelligent?
Yeah, and this ties into what a lot of research labs, everyone's chasing right now, AGI or artificial general intelligence. There's a lot of talk about when will we get to that, which basically is saying that AI will surpass the human level or at least be on par across a wide variety of subjects. I don't think that we're ever, just like you're saying, it's difficult to pin down what that means. Same thing with AGI. I don't think there's going to be one point in time where everyone's like, oh, we just made it, we're there. It's going to happen gradually because not everyone's going to agree, and you're just going to see this gradual improvement of AI capabilities.
One thing I'll say, you're right. I don't even know if I could come up with the novel way to solve or to play the game Go the way the LLM did, or maybe you couldn't. But I would think we're both intelligent, right? Like I don't know if I could produce a unique type of response that way.
There's a really interesting when they were working on AlphaGo, the DeepMind project. There was 2 different. You can train AI systems based on existing data. So the way that Lee Sedol was a world-class player, all of his moves, and other world-class players, and so that's a supervised learning. Like here's some examples, perhaps questions and answers or moves that worked or didn't work. Another type of learning is reinforcement learning. And this is a really powerful one. It almost more closely mimics how people learn. Certainly, babies and infants, as you start trying different things and you realize like that worked well or it didn't, and then you remember the things that work better for you. So they trained a system to play Go using reinforcement learning, which is where the system just played itself or other automated competitors over and over and over again other than the rules of how to play the game, it was given nothing to start with. That system actually now has a higher rating than Lee Sedol.
Wow.
For the reason that you're talking about is because it wasn't like the system trained on a human basically became on par with the world-class human player. The one that they just let it learn on its own through trying it out
Wow.
surpassed the best. It's now the number, at least at the time, was the number one rated player. And that is a really cool thing about AI is it can and machine learning. It can sift through all of this data and find things that we might not necessarily
and
see.
we would call I would call that machine intelligent. Like I would think it's intelligent, but none of us at this point, like Lee Sedol, probably is very intelligent, but he can't do that. And so that's why it's hard to define it. But I would think Lee is intelligent, and that's why it's hard to define intelligence.
Yeah, I mean the best proxy we've used for many years is the IQ test, which I would argue is mainly about identifying patterns and being able to apply them. And so a form of abstract thinking. I'm going to take us to our last topic here. And we've talked a little bit about how students can use and leverage AI to help benefit them and the ethical. What would you say to faculty and instructors who are in the classroom working with students all the time? You know, I would say there's a range of emotions here, from fear of it to excitement about the opportunity. But what would your message be to instructors and AI?
Yeah, so this is a good wrapping up point. Going back to what we originally said is I don't think at this stage we're going to completely get rid of the technology. You know, there are probably a lot of countries that are highly regulating it to some degree, but I don't think we're going to get rid of it. And so the question is, well, then what do we do with it? And like I said before, I think we should bring it into the light and not keep it in the dark, and help students use it responsibly. So I kind of operate on that assumption. And so I'm one that gives students maybe, you know, within certain parameters more grace with this new technology, unless I see maybe just completely egregious violations.
Yeah.
And I give students the benefit of the doubt. But I do have an AI policy in my syllabus. So that's what I think. And so hopefully that's persuasive enough to either administration or professors when we want to get them to buy in to this. I don't know if just the complete the attitude of just like no AI, we're gonna go completely analog, and I don't know if that's the most effective attitude, because again it doesn't help students recognize how to use it responsibly. It keeps it in the dark, and or how to even use it effectively. And then I don't know if that attitude helps a school craft a good policy if an instructor is just completely wants to prohibit AI at all levels. I don't know if that's helpful to the future of the school, trying to figure out how do we approach AI if this technology is not going to go away.
Well, you're starting to see even the opposite. Some institutions are requiring graduating students, to have AI fluency. So AI fluency has, I think, become the kind of the common term for, you know, effective and responsible ethical usage.
Yeah. So that is, and that could be evidence that they recognize again the benefit. I mean, they are responding to sort of the market in a way, because they want their students to come to their school.
Sure.
Right? They are responding in that way, but I think they're also recognizing that it's not going to go away. We need to figure out how to use it in the right way. Yeah. So I think it's a very good point.
I think the challenge, maybe the tough part for us as faculty is, and I've only been teaching for a couple of years, but for someone who's been teaching a course for 10, 15 or more years, it's a challenge, because now you have to rethink, how do I handle this subject? I probably need to look at every assignment that I give and think about, okay, well, is this assignment just limited to, can I just copy and paste something that AI writes?
Right.
You know, the more that we can have process-oriented assignments and let students use AI as a tool along that process to help them, I think it's going to teach them a lot and look more like the work that they will be doing in the future in the workforce in a post AI world where those tools are available.
One thought I did have that just came to mind was if you look at some of the like psychological research in like with adolescent development, it does seem like as human beings we don't operate the best with just a free for all, like just completely let it go. We want structure, we want boundaries, and so we respond to that well. And I think maybe in some ways students, they might not say this, but maybe they are craving for that, or maybe they don't even know they need it, but they are craving for that. And so instead of just completely prohibiting it, we can provide those boundary markers, that structure for them to produce maybe better outcomes.
That's a fantastic point. Don't leave it wide open. Give the students guidance on here are the parameters in which I want you to use it, and the structure. You're right. I know I need structure if I'm on. If I go on a week-long vacation, I certainly enjoy it, but I'm kind of craving the routine when I come back a little bit. But yeah, and that kind of guidance and how we should be educating and directing students.
Yeah, I need structure too. So I'm with you. Yeah, yeah.
Any other closing thoughts?
No, I will say Darren and I found out that we share an affinity for the band Yellow Card when we were trying to toss around some ideas for this, and I was just thinking about that, and that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is great. I hope this is beneficial to some, and I think both of us have a passion for this and care about trying to present AI in a good light, but the most appropriate light. And we're still figuring some things out. We're still learning some things.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was our latest edition of the Hawk Talk podcast. I thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give the obligatory, please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell your friends and neighbors. And we hope you got a lot out of this, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
I thought that went pretty good.